Joining us now, we have Sara Carter, investigative reporter, Fox News contributor. Greg Jarrett is the author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, The Russian Hoax. Thank you both for being back with us. Let's give a summary of what we learned this week. I think we got more struck page emails and insight just again as to how desperate they were before the election and after the election to destroy Donald Trump and to hide all their nefarious activities.
And this is a disaster, Sean, for the FBI and the DOJ. Not only was collusion a complete hoax based on fabricated evidence, but as you point out, the FBI, the DOJ, the DNI, the CIA, all leaking to frame Donald Trump. And these text messages prove it. There was a media leak strategy. Literally, Strzok and Page were dumb enough to text about it, and then they bragged about their success. The article is out. Well done, Page. It's a complete lie for Strzok and his lawyer to say, oh, no, we were stopping leaks. No, that text
Well, that was an outright lie by his attorney. I mean, the attorney had to know these other text messages were coming out, didn't he?
Yeah, and this is what gives lawyers a bad name. They're more than willing to misrepresent and deceive people on behalf of their clients. This is some of the most incriminating evidence yet of Obama's Justice Department, James Comey's FBI, in a deliberate scheme to use their government positions for corrupt, illegal purposes. They invented the whole thing, then leaked the false evidence to the media, which was more than willing to run with the narrative that Trump colluded with Russia to win the election. They knew it wasn't true. It was all a lie, and they knew it.
They knew it from the beginning. But if you go to this integrity issue, I take offense, Peter Strzok says. Well, he's caught red-handed in all of this. That was something that he told Congressman Mark Walker of North Carolina and called it insulting, and I take offense, and it's not correct. And Walker was focused on the questioning of the volume of text between him and Page. Look, there's over 50,000 messages. I don't think we have 1,000 of them yet, do we, Sara Carter?
No, we don't. And I think this is what's so stunning. If you look at the defense, Peter Strzok's attorney tried to push forward, saying, oh, they were just trying to stop these leaks. And then you look at the text messages that came out on Wednesday, those specifically. Strzok writes to Page saying, also, apparently the Times, meaning the New York Times, is angry with us about the Washington Post scoop and the earlier discussion we had about the Schmidt piece that had so many inaccuracies. Too much detail here, but I told Mike, which I believe, and I spoke to a couple of U.S. officials, was Mike Corton, former head of the Public Relations Office for the FBI. He also resigned. And Andy, being Andy McCabe, that they need to understand we were absolutely dealing in good faith with them. The FISA one, coupled with the Guardian piece from yesterday, we were dealing in good faith with them. They're saying, we've been talking to the Washington Post and to the Times, and the reason the Times was so upset, Sean, was because right during that time is when the Washington Post did the big expose, the first big story on Carter Page, that came out and said the FBI obtained a FISA warrant to monitor former Trump advisor Carter Page. That was April 11th, 2017. In April, former FBI Director James Comey had just authorized the third FISA renewal on Carter Page. So they were basically leaking the most highly classified information to the Washington Post to change the narrative against President Trump and put all of this onus on the Trump administration that they had basically propagated lies, just like Greg is saying, from a phony dossier that is unproven, unverified, committed basically to the Post, all of this information, which is highly classified, in order to push that out to the media to create a disinformation campaign against the Trump administration. There is nothing more damaging and egregious than that to national security. And that is coming from people I've spoken with, from the CIA to Western intelligence officials overseas that I have spoken with, as well as FBI, former and current, right now. There is nothing more egregious.
It looks to me, and I may be wrong, but I'm beginning to put pieces of the puzzle together, that there are indications now that Robert Mueller wants to wrap this up, that Rod Rosenstein wants to wrap this up. Everybody knows the president is on the verge of releasing information that they have been desperately trying to keep from the American people. That would include the 302s with Steele and Orr. They're critical because we now know that Christopher Steele, who didn't believe in his own dossier, had so much contact with Bruce Orr, over 70 instances of contact that we know of with meetings and handwritten notes, 302s that were written, text messages, emails sent back and forth, and that Christopher Steele, even though he didn't believe in his own dossier, was pushing it into the hands of the special counsel's office. That then gets very close to Andrew Weissman. He's the pit bull for Robert Mueller. Then, of course, Rod Rosenstein himself signs the fourth FISA warrant, the final FISA warrant, the third renewal warrant. He has issues with that. He also is the one that recommended he fire Comey. Also, we're hearing that there's no evidence of collusion. They never had any. They're not going after an obstruction case. So now it's a question of how they can wrap this up, end all of this, and probably try and save as many of their deep state friends as possible from the jail they likely deserve. Are you both hearing the same thing?
Yeah, I am hearing the same thing, that that they're in a panic now because, in particular, for Robert Mueller, his lead prosecutor, Andrew Weissman, was in on the use of the phony dossier. He was, quote-unquote, in the loop. That's the testimony of Bruce Orr. You know, Mueller's investigation is completely tainted and corrupted. It was bad enough with Peter Strzok, who was fired, but now with Andrew Weissman as the key prosecutor in the case, Mueller's probe has lost all integrity and credibility. He's got to wrap it up. I think that's one of the reasons why Mueller was more than willing to have Paul Manafort plead down to a few of the charges against him, because I think Mueller wants to wrap this whole darn thing up because it's crumbling before his and Rod Rosenstein's very eyes.
Well, is it going to crumble, though? I mean, look, we watched the plea deal with Manafort. My sources tell me that whatever cooperation is going to be involved has nothing to do with Russia, nothing to do with the campaign,
right.
Nothing to do with Trump. Are you hearing the same thing?
I am hearing the same thing, and all you have to do is read the new indictment that was released a couple of hours before the plea deal today. If you read in it, they refer to Company B. Company B is Tony Podesta's group. His brother, of course, John, was chairman of Hillary Clinton's campaign. The Podesta group knew they were representing a foreign government. The emails cited in the indictment prove it. The Podesta group didn't register under FARA, which is a crime, and instead they had a scheme, an illegal scheme. They used a Brussels nonprofit as cover. Tony Podesta could be charged criminally under FARA as well as conspiracy to defraud the government. When a lackey like Philippe Reigns, Hillary Clinton's lackey, tweets out a profane tweet today claiming that Manafort is going to flip against Trump, Reigns doesn't know what he's talking about. The fact is that Manafort will implicate, it appears, Tony Podesta and the law firm, perhaps, Skadden Arps, that was doing legal work for all of this.
And your take on, do you believe the same thing? Do you think they're trying to bring this to a close, mostly out of fear about what Donald Trump is likely to unredact and declassify next week? Sarah?
I think so, Sean. I think that it's wrapping up because they realize there is so much evidence already made public. It's not just circumstantial evidence, and I've said this before. These are actually texts in their own words. Now Congress is looking at calling all of these same players back, re-questioning them, asking them questions about this, because remember, at the time they interviewed Peter Strzok, at the time they interviewed Lisa Page and all these other players, they didn't have the full context of all these text messages. This is because the DOJ and the FBI have been so slow to bring them out. And now Congress is asking for even more. They're asking for all the communications of Joe Pientka, of other people that were involved. Joe was the other FBI agent that went to question Lieutenant General Michael Flynn with Peter Strzok that day at the White House, where Flynn basically ended up copying a guilty plea, even though to one count of lying to the agents, even though Comey himself said he did not believe that Peter Strzok lied, because both of the agents had basically said that when they went back to the field office. And this is even coming from Peter Strzok. But Mueller, once again, this is the heavy arm of the special counsel, basically pushing Flynn, as well as others like George Papadopoulos, moving in on Paul Manafort, looking at old cases, and then actually strong-arming them into guilty pleas. I think right now Mueller realizes that there's no place left to go here. And there's no way they can go after obstruction, Sean. There's just no way they can do it because you have Rod Rosenstein, who wrote the letter to President Trump to basically fire and gave all the reasons why the president should fire Director Comey, and now he's overseeing this. He's either a witness or a co-conspirator. That's what, Victoria and Joe DeGenova keep saying, and it's absolutely true. There's only two options for him there.
Well, then the cleanup is going to be interesting. How do they clean this up? Are these people going to be indicted? We'll ask Greg and Sarah when we get back. All right, as we continue, Greg Jarrett and Sara Carter are with us. All right, so Manafort's issues are now over. It's just probably a matter of sentencing, although he's cooperating, but not anything Trump-related or campaign-related or Russia-related. That's an interesting find by Greg Jarrett. Now the question is, there seems to be great fear with all the revelations and all the leaking and all the anti-Trump activists that were at the top levels of the Department of Justice, the FBI, CIA, and even in the Director of National Intelligence Office. How do they get out of this?
I think he's going to wrap it up with all of the charges that he's already brought on people. I don't think there's any place he can go further with this. And I think the second part of this is going to be...
And you mean he's just not going to write a report? He's going to let the indictments that he has stand for themselves?
Absolutely. That's exactly what I believe. And I think the second phase is going forward with prosecutions, or at least we know there's a grand jury impaneled now against Andrew McCabe, and we know that John Huber, and I just spoke to the Department of Justice, John Huber is still in charge, even though we're questioning why he hasn't interviewed a number of people, but he's still working closely alongside the Inspector General, I've been told today, and they are moving forward with their investigations. So that's still ongoing, and I think there's going to be a lot of revelations.
Greg, we could see the end of the Mueller investigation without a report, and we could see the beginning of the process of holding these top people in the DOJ, the FBI, and these different agencies accountable. Do you really believe that?
I am hearing, as Joe DeGenova has reported, that there is a grand jury that is legitimately looking into FISA abuse and all of the lies and deceptions and fraud that were perpetrated on the Fisk court. And so if that is the case, they shouldn't just stop there. They should now look into the crime of leaking classified information to the media to frame Donald Trump in these latest texts over the last several days prove it. So all of that, I mean, there are so many crimes here, you would need a calculator to keep track of them.
I honestly, and I'll say this to both of you, without your work, both of you and some others, there's too many to mention here, David Schoen, and I can't even begin to name everybody. I don't think we'd be here today. I think they would have gotten away with all of this. And
I don't think it would have happened without you either, Sean. I mean, it takes a lot of people because the rest of the media is not reporting all of these facts.
No.
And without a platform to get that out, we wouldn't be able to move forward with these stories.
Well, we'll see. I still don't trust these people. I just have a natural distrust of all of them, sadly.